I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you had a great Easter. I know I haven't seen you since last week when I read the chapter. Mrs. Kelsey read on Tuesday. I know Easter was a little different for us this year because I usually see my aunt and my uncle and my little cousins, and they were not around this year because we're all staying away from each other. So I did get to FaceTime with them a little bit. So that was super fun. I know it's springtime. The weather's getting super nice, which I love, but I am missing my favorite season of all, which is baseball season. That was supposed to start, and it hasn't. So that's been a little crazy. But I'm sure you guys are also going through some things that you miss. I'm sure you guys, some of you were supposed to start baseball and softball. Some of you may be running track or doing a spring soccer. I know all of the sports are canceled right now, so I'm sure you guys are missing things too. So just know you're not alone and that we're all in this together. I'm really hoping that this is working. I'm doing a live right now, but this will be recorded and will be sent out to the students who are not on later. So this will be good. And you'll have to let me know in the comments or in a private message if you like doing this live stream, and we can try to set it up again for the next time. So let's go ahead and get started today. So Mrs. Kelsey read the almonds chapter last time, and we had some cool stuff that happened in there. So we found out that Miguel and Alfonso's package that they were bringing to California was for Esperanza and her mama, and it was Papa's roses. They said that even though it had burnt down, they had dug far into the ground and gotten the bulbs from them. And we knew that's why they had to keep getting off the train and keeping them wet so that they would grow. That's probably one of my favorite parts of the book because I think it was super sweet of them to do. Because they did not have to do that. They're trying to make Mama and Esperanza feel as at home as possible. We know that Esperanza is also going through a little bit of embarrassment. In the chapter I read, she didn't know anything about how to sweep the platform. In this last chapter that Mrs. Kelsey read, she was still expecting Hortensia to give her a bath. So we know that she's kind of feeling a little embarrassed about what she thinks should happen. And what she's supposed to do because she doesn't really know how to do it. So we've kind of seen a change in her a little bit there. In the last chapter, she also got to go to her first Jamaica. So that described that a little bit. But the big highlight of that was we met Marta again. And she was trying to get all of the workers to go on strike. And as Mrs. Kelsey explained, when you go on strike, that's when you're refusing to work in order to get something in return. So they were going to refuse to work in order to get better pay and better housing. According to the book, where Marta lives, she lives in a different camp. I think her housing and pay is much worse than where Esperanza and her family live right now. So that's what they are trying to get is better housing like Esperanza and them have. We've seen a big change in Esperanza. I know that after she had heard Marta speaking, she said that she felt bad for her, and I thought that that was very nice of her considering how mean Marta's been to her. I thought it was very grown up. And also the other part that kind of stuck out to me was when Mama asked her what she wanted to pray for. And it was all stuff that had nothing to do with her except for the last part when she asked for candy. She said she wanted to light a candle in Papa's memory. She prayed Miguel would find a job at the railroad. And she asked that Our Lady help her take care of Lupe and Pepe while Isabel's at school. So she's thinking of more people other than herself right now, which I think is a big, big change for her. So we are going to get started today on page 139. This chapter is called Las Ciruelas, or the Plums chapter. I'm always intrigued, and I've said this before in my videos, that these have something to do with food, and I'm always curious to see where the food pops into these. And this one's actually kind of funny. It turns out that Esperanza kind of does something with the plums that she's not supposed to, but then she kind of finds a way to help it later on, and you'll see what I mean when we read. Now this chapter is kind of, we're reaching a point where it's going to get kind of worrisome, and there's a lot that happens in this little chapter. So here we go. We're on page 139, and it is Las Ciruelas, or the Plums. As they walked to the bus stop, Isabel recited a list of concerns to Esperanza, sounding exactly as Josefina and Mama had sounded earlier that morning. That means Isabel was kind of reiterating to her what she needed to do. Put Pepe down for a nap first, and when he falls asleep, put Lupe down. Otherwise, they will play and never go to sleep, and Lupe will not eat bananas. I know, said Esperanza, repositioning Pepe on her hip. Isabel handed her Lupe and climbed the steps of the yellow bus. She found a seat and waved from the window. Esperanza wondered who was more worried, she or Isabel. So remember, this is Esperanza's first week first week alone with the babies while Isabel goes to school. Esperanza struggled to carry both babies back to the cabin. Thank goodness Isabel had already helped her feed and dress them. She settled them on a blanket on the floor with some tin cups and wood blocks, then put the beans into a big pot on the stove. Hortensia had prepared them earlier with a big onion and a few cloves of garlic and instructed Esperanza to stir them occasionally and let them cook on low heat, adding more water throughout the day. She stirred the beans and watched Lupe and Pepe play. I wish Abuelita could see me, she thought. She would be proud. Later, Esperanza looked for something to feed the babies for lunch. A bowl of ripe plums sat on the table. They should be soft enough to eat, she thought. She took several, removed the pit, and mashed them with a fork. Both babies loved them, reaching for more after each spoonful. Esperanza mashed another 3 plums, and they gobbled every bite. She let them have their fill until they started fussing and reaching for their bottles of milk. Now I'm going to stop right there. Does anybody know what happens when you give babies lots of plums? Well, we're going to find out here in just a few minutes. Enough of lunch, said Esperanza, cleaning their faces and gratefully thinking that it would soon be nap time. She slowly changed their wet diapers, remembering all of Josefina's and Isabel's instructions. She put Pepe down first with his bottle as directed, and when he fell asleep, she put Lupe next to him. Esperanza lay down too, wondering why she was so tired, and she dozed, which means she fell asleep. She woke up to Lupe's whimpering and an atrocious smell. Brown liquid leaked from her diaper. Esperanza picked her up and carried her out of the room so she wouldn't wake Pepe. She changed into a dry diaper and rolled the soiled one into a ball and put it by the door until she could take it to the toilets. When she put Lupe back down, Pepe was sitting up in bed, in the same condition. She repeated the diaper changing. With both babies clean, she left them in the bed and dashed to the toilets to rinse the diapers. Then she ran back to the cabin. A different smell greeted her. The beans! She had forgotten to add more water. When she checked the pot, they appeared to be scorched only on the bottom, so she poured in water and stirred them. The babies cried and never went back to sleep. Both dirtied their diapers again. The wadded pile by the door grew. They must be ill, worried Esperanza. Did they have the flu, or was it something they ate? No one else had been sick recently. What had they eaten today? Only their milk and the plums. The plums, she groaned. They must have been too hard on their stomachs. What did Hortensia give her when she was a child and was sick? She tried to remember. Rice water. But how did she make it? Esperanza put a pot on the stove and added a cup of rice. She wasn't sure how much water to add, but she remembered that when the rice didn't come out soft, Hortensia always said it needed more water. She added plenty and boiled the rice. Then she poured off the water and let it cool. She sat on the floor with the babies and fed them teaspoons of rice water all afternoon, counting the minutes until Isabel walked through the door. Come here, Bo. Come here. What happened? Said Isabel when she arrived and saw the pile of diapers by the door. They were sick from the plums, said Esperanza, nodding toward the plate still on the table where she had mashed them. Oh, Esperanza, they are too young for raw plums. Everyone knows that plums must be cooked for babies, said Isabel. Well, I am not everyone, yelled Esperanza. She dropped her head and put her hands over her face. Pepe crawled into her lap, making happy gurgling noises. She looked at Isabel, already sorry for screaming at her. I didn't mean to yell. It was a long day. I gave them some rice water, and they seem to be fine now. Sounding surprised, Isabel said, That was exactly the right thing to do. Esperanza nodded and let out a long sigh of relief. That night, no one mentioned the number of rinsed and wrung diapers in the wash tub outside the door, or the beans that were obviously burnt, or the pan of rice in the sink. And no one questioned Esperanza when she said that she was exhausted and wanted to go to bed early. So already on her first day, things are kind of going awry a little bit. All right, I'm on the top of page 144. The grapes had to be finished before the first fall rains and had to be picked rapido or quickly. So now there were no Saturdays or Sundays in the week, just work days. The temperature was still over 90 each day, so as soon as Isabel's bus left for school, Esperanza took the babies back to the cabin. She fixed their bottles of milk and let them play while she made the beds. Then she followed Hortensia's instructions for starting dinner before turning to the laundry. She was amazed at the hot, dry air. Often, by the time she had filled the clotheslines that were strung between the trees, she had only minutes to rest before the valley sun dried the clothes crisp and they were ready to fold. Irene and Melina came over after lunch and Esperanza spread a blanket in the shade. Esperanza liked Melina's company. In some ways, she was a young girl, sometimes playing with Isabel and Sylvia or telling Esperanza gossip as if they were school friends. In other ways, she was grown up, with a nursing baby and a husband, and preferring to crochet with the older women in the evenings. "Do you crochet?" Melina asked. "I know a little, but only a few stitches," said Esperanza, remembering Abuelita's blanket of zigzag rows that she had been too preoccupied to unpack. Melina laid her sleeping baby girl on the blanket and picked up her needlework. Irene cut apart a 50-pound flour sack that was printed with tiny flowers to use as fabric for dresses. Esperanza tickled Pepe and Lupe, and they laughed. "They adore you," said Melina. "They cried yesterday when I watched them for a few minutes. For the few minutes it took you to sweep the platform." It was true. Both babies smiled when Esperanza walked into the room, always reaching for her, especially Pepe. Lupe was good-natured, or kind, friendly, and patient, and less demanding or needy, but Esperanza learned to watch her closely as she often tried to wander away. If she turned her back for a minute, Esperanza found herself frantically searching for Lupe. Esperanza rubbed Lupe and Pepe's backs, hoping they would go to sleep soon, but they were restless and wouldn't settle even though they had their bottles. The afternoon sky looked peculiar, tinged with yellow, and there was so much static in the air that the baby's soft hair stuck out. "Today is the day of the strike," said Melina. "I heard they were going to walk out this morning." "Everyone was talking about it last night at the table," said Esperanza. "Alfonso said he is glad that everyone from our camp agreed to continue working. He is proud that we won't strike." So everyone from their camp agreed to keep working and not follow along with the strike, which is a good thing because in Alfonso's point of view, he needs a job to make money so that they can buy things and live. And he says if they strike, that they will not be able to do that. Oh, hold on, got to get a spot for Bo to settle down so he doesn't keep barking. Irene continued working on the flour sack and shaking her head. "So many Mexicans have the revolution still in their blood. I am sympathetic to those who are striking, and I am sympathetic to those of us who want to keep working. We all want the same things, to eat and feed our children." Esperanza nodded. She had decided that if she and Mama were to get Abuelita here, they could not afford to strike. Not now, not when they so desperately needed money and a roof over their heads. She worried about what many were saying. If they didn't work, the people from Oklahoma would happily take their jobs. Then what would they do? A sudden blast of hot wind took the flour sack from Irene's hand and carried it to the fields. The babies sat up, frightened. Another hot blast hit them, but kept on, and when the edges of the blanket blew up, Lupe reached for Esperanza, whining. "Come on, get up here. Get up here." Irene stood up and pointed to the east. The sky was darkening with amber clouds, and several brown tumbleweeds bounced towards them. A royal of brown loomed over the mountains. "Una tormenta de polvo! Dust storm," said Irene. "Hurry!" They picked up the babies and ran inside. Irene closed the door and began shutting the windows. What's happening? Asked Esperanza. A dust storm like nothing you have seen before, said Melina. They are awful. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a dust storm before, but they tend to happen in areas that are really dry. And it's when it's honestly just how it sounds. It's a storm of dust. The wind picks up like a heavy wind, like we would get maybe during a thunderstorm, and it just blows the dust around. It's crazy. And she'll give us some more details about it as we go. What about Mama and Hortensia and the others? Alfonso and Miguel, they are in the fields. They will send trucks for them, said Irene. Esperanza looked out the window. Thousands of acres of tilled soil were becoming food for La Tormenta, and the sky was turning into a brown, swirling fog. Already she could not see the trees just a few yards away. Then the sound began, softly at first, like a gentle rain, then harder as the wind blasted the tiny grains of sand against the window and metal roofs. The dirt showered against the cabin, pitting everything in its path. Get away from the window, warned Irene. The dirt and wind can break the glass. The finer dust seeped inside, and they tried to seal the door by stuffing rags under it. Esperanza couldn't stop thinking about the others. Isabel was at school. The teachers would take care of her. But Mama, Hortensia, and Josefina were in the open shed. She hoped the trucks would bring them soon. In the fields, she could only imagine. Alfonso and Juan and Miguel, could they breathe? Irene, Melina, and Esperanza sat on the mattress in the front room trying to calm the babies. There was no relief from the heat in the closed room, and soon the air was hazy. Irene dampened some towels so they could wipe the babies and their own faces. When they talked to one another, they tasted the earth. How long does it last? Asked Esperanza. Sometimes hours, said Irene. The wind will stop first, and then the dust. Esperanza heard a meowing from the door. She ran to it and, pushing hard against the wind, opened it a crack. Isabel's kitten, Chiquita, darted in. There was no trace of her orange fur. The cat was powdered brown. The babies finally fell asleep, drowsy from the heavy air. Irene was right. The wind stopped, but the dust still swirled as if propelled by its own power. Irene and Melina left with Melina's baby covered beneath a blanket and rushed to their cabin. Esperanza waited, nervously pacing the room and worrying about the others. The school bus came first. Isabel burst into the cabin crying, "Mi gata, Chiquita," which means her cat. Esperanza hugged her. She is fine, but very dirty and hiding under the bed. Are you all right? Yes, said Isabel. We got to sit in the cafeteria all afternoon and play games with erasers on our heads. But I was worried about Chiquita. The door opened again and Mama walked into the cabin, her skin covered with an eerie brown chalkiness and her hair dusted, like the cat's fur. Oh, Mama. I am fine, mija, she said, coughing. Hortensia and Josefina followed, and Isabel put her hands on her cheeks in worried surprise. You look like raccoons, she said. All of their faces had circles of pink around their eyes where they had squinted against the dust. The trucks could not find their way to the shed, so all we could do was sit and wait, said Hortensia. We hid behind some crates and buried our heads, but it did not help much. Josefina took the babies next door, and Mama and Hortensia began washing their arms in the sink, making muddy water. Mama continued to cough. What about Alfonso and Juan and Miguel? Asked Esperanza. If the trucks could not get to us, they could not get to the fields. We will have to wait, said Hortensia, exchanging a worried look with Mama. A few hours later, Juan, Alfonso, and Miguel arrived, their clothes stiff and brown, all of them coughing and clearing their throats every few minutes. Their faces were so encrusted with dry dirt, or so covered and caked with dry dirt, that they reminded Esperanza of cracked pottery. They took turns rinsing in the sink, the pile of brown clothes growing in the basket. When Esperanza looked outside, she could almost see the trees, but the dust was still thick in the air. Mama had a coughing spasm, and Hortensia tried to settle her with a glass of water. When the adults all finally sat down at the table, Esperanza asked, "What happened with the strike?" "There was no strike," said Alfonso. "We heard that they were all ready and that there were hundreds of them. They had their signs, but the storm hit. The cotton is next to the ground, and the fields are now buried in dirt and cannot be picked. Tomorrow they will have no jobs because of an act of God." So they, over at the farm where they were getting ready to strike at, they were picking cotton, and cotton grows really close to the ground. Well, because of this dust storm, all of the cotton got covered in dirt completely. So now they don't have any jobs tomorrow, anyways, which they were kind of planning on if they were striking. But not because they went on strike and refused to work, but because of this dust storm. They call that an act of God. So they say that the weather sometimes is caused by God. So they said by an act of God, they don't have jobs because of this dust storm. "What will we do tomorrow?" asked Esperanza. "The grapes are higher off the ground," said Alfonso. "The trunks of the vines are covered, but the fruit was not affected. The grapes are ready and cannot wait. So mañana, or tomorrow, we will go back to work." The next morning, the sky was blue and calm, and the dust had left the air. It had settled on the world, covering everything like a suede blanket. Everyone who lived at the camp shook out the powdery soil, went back to work, and came home again as if nothing had happened. In a week, they finished cutting the grapes. Then, while they finished packing the grapes, they were already talking about preparing for potatoes. The camp routine repeated itself like the regimented rows in the fields. Very little seemed to change, thought Esperanza, except the needs of the earth. And Mama. Mama had changed, because after the storm, she never stopped coughing. I'm in the middle of page 153. I'm curious to know what some of you are thinking right now as you're reading this and wondering what's going to happen, because I know I am. "Mama, you're so pale," said Esperanza. Mama carefully walked into the cabin as if she were trying to keep her balance and slumped into a chair in the kitchen. Hortensia was bustling behind her. That means she was coming in quickly behind her. "I am going to make her chicken soup with lots of garlic. She had to sit down at work today because she felt faint. But it is no wonder because she is not eating. Look at her. She has lost weight. She has not been herself since that storm, and that was a month ago. I think she should go to the doctor." So now we learned that this next part that we've gone into is a month after this dust storm. And since then, Mama has not been well. She's been coughing, she hasn't been eating, and she's lost a lot of weight. "Mama, listen to her," pleaded Esperanza. Mama looked at her weakly. "I am fine, just tired. I'm not used to the work. And I've told you, doctors are very expensive." "Irene and Melina are coming over after dinner to crochet," said Esperanza. She thought that would cheer Mama. "You sit with them," said Mama. "I'm going to lie down until the soup is ready because I have a headache. Then after dinner, I'll go straight to bed and get a good rest. I'll be fine." She coughed, got up, and slowly walked from the room. Hortensia looked at Esperanza, shaking her head. A few hours later, Esperanza stood over Mama. "Your soup is ready, Mama." But she didn't move. "Mama, dinner," said Esperanza, reaching for her arm and gently shaking her. Mama's arm was burning, her cheeks were flushed red, and she wasn't waking. Esperanza felt panic squeezing her, and she screamed, "Hortensia!" The doctor came. He was American, light and blonde, but he spoke perfect Spanish. "He looks very young to be a doctor," said Hortensia. "He has come to the camp before, and people trust him," said Irene. "And there are not many doctors who will come out here." Alfonso, Juan, and Miguel sat on the front steps, waiting. Isabel sat on the mattress, her eyes worried. Esperanza could not sit still. She paced near the bedroom door, trying to hear what was going on inside. When the doctor finally came out, he looked grim. He walked over to the table where all the women sat. Esperanza followed him. The doctor signaled for the men and waited until everyone was inside. "She has valley fever." "What does that mean?" asked Esperanza. It's a disease of the lungs that is caused by dust spores. Sometimes when people move to this area and aren't used to the air here, the dust spores get into their lungs and cause an infection. But we were all in the dust storm, said Alfonso. When you live in this valley, everyone inhales the dust spores at one time or another. Most of the time, the body can overcome the infection. Some people will have no symptoms at all. Some will feel like they have the flu for a few days, and others, for whatever reason, cannot fight the infection and get very sick. How sick? Asked Hortensia. Esperanza sat down. She may have a fever on and off for weeks, but you must try to keep it down. She will cough and have headaches and joint aches. She might get a rash. Can we catch it from her? The babies? Asked Josephina. No, said the doctor. It isn't contagious, and the babies and young children have probably had a mild form of it already without you even knowing. Once the body fights off the infection, it doesn't get it again. For those who live here, most of their lives, they are naturally immunized or protected from it. It is hardest on adults who move here and are not accustomed to the agricultural dust. So because they just moved to this area of California where there's a lot of this dust, Mama's lungs are not used to it, and she inhaled too much of it, and that's what caused her valley fever. How long until she is well? Asked Esperanza. The doctor's face looked tired. He ran his hand through his short blonde hair. There are medicines she can take, but even then, if she survives, it might take 6 months for her to get back to full strength, or to get her full strength back. Esperanza felt Alfonso behind her, putting his hands on her shoulders. She felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to tell the doctor that she could not lose Mama too, that she had already lost Papa and that Abuelita was too far away. Her voice strangled with fear. All she could do was whisper the doctor's uncertain words, if she survives. All right, guys, that's the end of that chapter. It's kind of a crazy place to stop, I know, and I'm sorry for that. This chapter is going to be due by Friday, so I'm not sure that you're going to have another chapter this week, but we will definitely have one at the start of next week. The next chapter is called Las Papas, or potatoes, so we'll have to see what happens with that. Now that Mama's sick, I think I'm wondering what you guys are thinking is going to happen. What are you thinking Esperanza is going to have to do, or what kind of new maybe jobs or something she's going to have to kind of take on? We'll see as we keep reading. I know we're getting to a pretty good point in the book. That's a hard place to stop. The weather looks beautiful outside today. I think it's a little chilly, but if you put on a coat, I hope you're able to go out and do something fun. I hope your families and you all are staying healthy and safe and are trying to find some fun stuff to do. I know I've gotten to spend a lot of extra time with my family during this, which I greatly appreciate, because I think when life is at our normal, as we used to call it, we were here and there and had to go to practice and had to go to work. So now that people are home, even though times can be tough, I think it's been good to be able to spend that extra time too. So get your work done, get outside, go do something fun, play a game, build a fort, do something, play with your animals if you have them. And we will be seeing you soon, hopefully. I continue to miss you all. I can't tell you that enough, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing it from me. But please, please, please continue to get a lot of sleep, wash your hands, stay healthy, so that if we can return to school, that we can see you. All right, guys, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon.